I have to say I'm very excited to have the opportunity of introducing the first of our keynote speakers. He is an outstanding achiever in both sporting and academic fields, and for those that follow the AFL, he needs little introduction. He has graced our TV screens and radio waves for many years. David's accomplishments as a football player and coach are outstanding. As a player, he played 212 senior games for Hawthorn and captained the Hawthorn Football Club to their second premiership in 1971 and coached them to a flag in 1978. A state representative in 1965 and 68, and he coached the Carlton Football Club to successive premierships in 1981-82. He is regarded as one of the super coaches of the 70s and 80s. With the application of an innovative coaching technique, Carlton set a new record for unbroken series of AFL winning games, culminating in the 1995 premiership. David is just one of 6 coaches to have coached over 500 games. The others, for what it's worth, are Tom Hafey, Jock McHale, Alan Jeans, Kevin Sheedy, and Ron Barassi, so not bad company. David's professional experience includes President of the Australian Football Coaches Association, Executive Officer of the Australian Football Coaches Association, Director of Football at Hawthorn, and President of the Australian Football Coaches Association in Victoria. But he is so much more than champion football player, successful coach, leader of successful teams, and multiple Hall of Fame member. His academic achievements are also outstanding and include developing and lecturing in the sports coaching degree course at Deakin University, a lecturer at Victorian College, Burwood Campus, State College of Victoria, Burwood Campus, and Burwood Teachers College. David holds a Bachelor of Education from the University of Western Australia. He's also a prolific writer. He has written and published more than a dozen books and many, many articles. He is an outstanding example of leadership at the highest level. And today you are going to hear about the theory and practice of effective leadership. With the title of Leadership is the Key, please welcome David Parkin.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Ken, for reminding everybody who I used to be. It's I think a combination of being on Zoom and being very close to an octogenarian at the moment. I'm pretty nervous about delivering something along these lines. I've actually wanted to provoke your thinking, certainly around the topic you've suggested on leadership. That's why we're here, and hoping to be provoked. But I also want to spend just a small bit of time on the men's health issue, which has been another central focus of my life. I've had a fascination of and an interest in as to why some people, female and male, have had such a positive impact on my life, and others no impact, or in fact a negative one. It's got to the point now where I've read, I reckon, as many books on leadership and co-authored, as you suggested, a number. I think Perform or Else back in 1999, What Makes Teams Work in 2004, and our last one, Captain Coach Leadership, in 2011. It's been a fascination for me as to why some people impact us in a leadership way and others don't. What's been interesting is that, other than my parents, and I certainly chose my parents extremely well, I've had 4 very significant leaders in my life. One was mentioned in John Kennedy, and the other 3, in fact, were females. And I've had 4 of my life's great influences, 3 being females, which might, in some people's idea, be unreasonable. And the 3 I should just mention, Betty Walpole and Jane Den Hollander, were my immediate superiors, my bosses at Deakin University, and Rhonda Galbally, who was the woman who led Vic Health in Victoria when it was first established, a brilliant leader who did very significant things in that health domain. The longer I live, to be truthful, the more convinced I've become that leadership required from anyone, male or female, should be determined by the specific situation in which exists at that particular time, which means that your leadership style needs to be flexible. And I mean flexible from autocratic through to democratic, I suppose, and even through to what I would call laissez-faire. Now, this is one man's view, but certainly not universally accepted. What do I think about leadership today, right now in the world? While today is dramatically different from even two short years back when we think about it, and the world of the last century, again, is significantly different to the previous century. The one obvious fact remains that leadership is critical to the specific situation, whether I'm talking about family or education or business or government or in my case, for most of my life, sport. Effective leadership underpins almost all positive outcomes from involvement in those institutions. We can talk about talent, resources and opportunity, and even that thing called luck. But my life in education, business, family and sport says the quality of leadership of any organisations I've suggested 4 times already is the key to its success. My life of nearly just on 8 decades now, I can't believe it, has seen the role of leader change at least 2 and now probably 3 times. When I was growing up, whether at home, school, work or sport, my leaders were all, and I think about it, all autocratic, dictatorial men. Knowing no different, I followed suit in each of those 4 facets of my life, and most would say with a reasonable degree of success. On the review of the Carlton Football Club, following a significant on-field failure, or failures plural, early in the 1990s, I was confronted with the necessity to change or in fact be sacked. Fortunately, with the support and direction from 2 very close colleagues, and they actually undertook the review, Paul Burke, who's just been my mate for as long as I remember and my great friend and mentor, and Anthony Stewart, who was in fact the sports psychologist employed at that time. They were able to convince me to change. I was introduced to what we now term situational specific leadership, a concept which I firmly support, even in these demanding times. This means some genuine flexibility in the way you manage and lead others. The playing group I had in the Carlton Football Club in the middle 90s was probably the most committed, competent and experienced group of AFL footballers ever seen, I mean, up to that point and since. I was convinced by Paul and Anthony to empower the players despite thinking we're letting the lunatics run the asylum. We appointed the leadership group probably today, and this is happening in most clubs, I think, from my understanding. The players and coaches would take the responsibility, but we in fact appointed 17 players who we thought were very experienced, very committed and very competent. What was interesting, we put the names on the board. Within a few minutes, I had one player, Barry Mitchell, the father of young Mitchell, now is playing at Hawthorn, knock on the door and say, do you have to be in that group? And I said, Barry, I mean, you're very experienced. He said, no, I've had an injury for 2 years. I've hardly been in the team. I don't feel a part of it. Do I have to be? I said, no, you don't have to be there. But the knee comes good and you get back in, I'd expect you to be part of it. Shook my hand out the door. I reckon 2 minutes later, I've got a knock on the door and it's the current St Kilda coach, Brett Ratton. He's a 2nd-year player. He's played 10 or 12 games, demanding that he be in the group. And I was really annoyed that he thought at this stage of his career that he was a leader in that sense. But he argued very strongly. I understand and know the game. I said to more than most of the blokes whose names are there, please, can I be on? Well, on that request, we put him in. And The interesting thing is that during that period in 1995, if you asked the players who were a part of that group, he probably was the most influential in terms of the decision making which they made, which is why he's probably gone on to do the things that he's doing today. So that group of 17 players decided who would play. That would never have happened in any sport anywhere in the world. They actually selected the teammates to play the game. They would then decide how we would play, given the opposition and what we'd expect for them. What do we need to do to defeat that particular team? So they were responsible for both the tactics and the strategies that we used on a weekly basis, decided in a meeting prior to the game. They debriefed performance, both individual and team. So they provided feedback both ways, coaches to coaches and coaches to players and players to players and players to coaches. And it's what is fundamental to the debriefing, I think, of most league clubs today. They decided what values and behaviours we would live by, what were the expectations of us as people. And then, and it was done a number of times during the year, they meted out the penalties for people who failed to live up to them. So the team produced, most people would know, the team produced the most successful season in the history of the VFL AFL, which was right for those players then, yet inappropriate within 2 seasons, when our list went to inexperienced, reasonably incompetent, and lacking in confidence. Therefore, a change in the situation, therefore, a change in the leadership style was required. So we had to revert back to me taking most of the control again in the decision making. So now, if you ask me what my leadership mantra would be, I've tried to clarify that the best I can, and there are 7 on this particular list. Number 1, engagement really matters. And I mean engaging with people is about asking questions, listening and hearing what those people say, and responding accordingly. We're not so good at that, leaders. We're very good at telling, but we're not so good at listening when asking the right questions and then responding according to the answers we get. So engagement really matters. Number 2, employees are, and I get sick of hearing that these are human resources. I do a lot of work in that particular department, and people in most businesses still talk about the personnel as human resources. They're not. They're human beings. They need to be supported, not exploited. And I think the fact that we call them resources, we think we should be exploiting them. Think about your people as human beings and how you would like to be treated as such. The third suggestion is that mindfulness has become an essential part of good business practice. And mindfulness does matter. You need to develop what I would call a caring culture. And that means caring beyond the workplace itself. Have genuine empathy and understanding of other people's welfare beyond their capacity to produce the performance for which you're paying. This is their life other than their work. And I would hope that the players that I coached over a long period of time would think I was just as interested in them and what they were doing in their work placement, their study, their community programs or whatever, as I was in their football. Build people's skills and competencies, which improve their confidence, their motivation, and their performance. Build people's skills and competencies. The 5th one is create a vision for them as individuals and us as an organisation. A vision for them as individuals and for us as an organisation. That is a shared task. We all should be involved in the vision that we are trying to create and develop and reach. The 6th one is building a high-performing team, which comes from what I would call psychological safety, people feeling safe in the environment which they work, feeling that they are being depended on, that the structure and the clarity of their role within it is understood completely, and what is the meaning of their particular role or work in that particular team. And that takes time. It's not as obvious as some people think, but a high-performing team has those things. It has psychological safety about people. It has the dependability that they think of their role within it, and the structure and the clarity is clear to all those who participate. What is the meaning of your role and your work within that team? And then, as I've been alluding to all the way, constant feedback. You can't improve your performance in anything, my belief. Self-reflection usually has all the biases and things which neglect or negate the things that you should be doing. Constant feedback, leader to team and team to leader, is absolutely crucial to develop that culture which allows that to happen. Feedback is crucial to performance. Open, honest, and wherever possible, immediate, with high quality conversations. I'd like just to deviate a bit and talk about men's health, which has become one of the crucial elements still in my life. I have two groups that I work with very closely. One is called GOX, the Gentlemen of Kokoda, who we walked Kokoda about 20 years ago. And we try to walk somewhere in the world each year, and we try and raise money and support young people who are in what's called the GYE program, the Geelong Youth Engagement Program, which sends young people from the Geelong area only, sadly. It sends them away, one group as leaders to develop their leadership quality, one group of young people who have been in strife, who have been in trouble with the law, and they go away together and walk Kokoda. It's a fantastic program. We underwrite people each year to go and walk that program. So that's one of my interests. The second one being the Mailbag Foundation. And we've got about nearly 30 guys now who ride silly Australian posties, Honda 110 motorbikes all over the country to raise money, if you like, to assist the purchase of what are called transperineal biopsy machines, which we put into rural regional hospitals so men can have the initial diagnosis done related to prostate cancer in their own area. Sadly, these machines have only been in the capital territories, and we're very proud that we've put 18 or 19 of those into rural regional areas of Australia. I looked in the Grand Final Record 2021, there was a small heading on page 76. Donate with the words prostate cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer in Australian men. With your support, you can give men longer and better lives. That was all that was given over to this insidious disease. I was in Warrnambool, heading at least towards South Australia. I was in Warrnambool a couple of years ago. We ran a men's health night. 120 turned up. It was a Rotary night, actually, Rotary dinner. 120 turned up, the RSL. 40 of them women and 80 of them blokes. This is a men's health night. And I was a bit disturbed, things I wanted to say and do. Said to the lady in the front row, "Why are you here?" She said, "Because he wouldn't come unless I brought him." So I got stuck into him and the others who wouldn't have been there unless their wives, thank goodness, had decided to come. I stood the 80 men up. I said, "Sit down if your father's still alive." About half sat down. One bloke up the back called out, "What if you don't know who your father is?" Well, that was a bit of a shock. And the other corner said, "Here." So I had two blokes in the audience who didn't know who their father was, whether they were alive or dead. Now, I'm not sure how you do it, and we had some discussion about it afterwards, but they needed to go and find out if it was humanly possible, because the genetics they hold will be the genetics that are handed down, as they were with me, with my particular father. It was interesting. 40 of them, 20 of them knew what their father was to. I still find that almost impossible to understand, but we need to know our history. The facts right now are, right at this time, is that 1 in 6 Australian men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer, 1 in 6. 1 in 32 will in fact die from prostate cancer. Over 3,000 Australian men are predicted to die from this disease in 2022. 3,000. It is the leading cause of death to men here other than lung cancer, second to lung cancer. Prostate cancer that spreads beyond the prostate gland is still incurable. What causes prostate cancer is still not known, but the risk factors include your family history, obviously, and as in my case, men over 50, and some dietary factors including high animal fats and protein. A patient diagnosed with localised prostate cancer has not spread outside the gland, has a dilemma now. 2 forms of treatment are available. Funny, isn't it? You go to my urologist and he's got a machine he's paid a couple of $1 million for. He's not going to go and tell me to get radiation therapy somewhere else. But there are 2 forms, surgery and 2 forms of that, and radiation therapy, which is available too, or often watchful waiting and monitoring of your PSA. Much we still don't know about this disease, but we do know that once it reaches an advanced state, there is currently no cure. And there's currently a lot of debate concerning PSA testing and the best methods of treatment. That's still going on. My story simply was, knew my family history, diligent surveillance from 40 years of age, both with a PSA and a digital rectal, but that's even interesting because I went to my urologist, who was a big ruckman, etc., with big fingers. He found the lump with the digital rectal examination that the GP couldn't find. So there's a bit of a problem. In July to December in 2008, my PSA doubled. No follow-up from December until the end of January. Thank goodness my GP got on my back and said, "What are you doing?" So I visited my urologist. Biopsy I had with an 8+ Gleason score, which is very high. So I ended up having a radical robotic prostatectomy. I'm alive, well, and cancer-free. Decade plus later, I'm living what you would call, I think, a normal life. So thank you, Rotary, for your specific support for the Mailbag Foundation and our work in ensuring that men in rural regional Australia can be assisted locally in their first step in the diagnosis and treatment of prostate cancer. This cancer will kill more men in Australia in the next 12 months than breast cancer will kill women. Yet the ability of this community, that's the community of females, will raise more money, complete significantly more research, and employ treble the number of nurses who support them. We're a long, long way behind. As a result of the public in South Australia and our fundraising activities, we now have been able to place transperineal biopsy machines into Mount Gambier and Berry hospitals. And very shortly, we hope to have one in Port Augusta too. So thanks for listening, and certainly help us to keep up this critical work. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Really informative. I almost felt like pulling the boots on and running out in the ground there for a moment. Via the chat, please put in any questions that you may have. I noticed there's some in there, and I'm going to hand over to Shia to actually select those questions and pass them on to David for a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, David. Very interesting, inspiring talk. The questions we've got, so I'm just going to go through in order. So John Seal from Geelong asked, is it penalising counterproductive? Because I think at the beginning with one of the leadership styles, you're saying you're penalising people. So is it counterproductive, or did you find that actually worked?
Yeah, again, the situations we find ourselves in vary so much. And I guess the first starting point is understanding where the people are that you're working with. And that rolls off the tongue to very, very easily. But knowing what the situation is really the reality of that situation then determines the method you should use, in my humble opinion, as a leader for that. And that is not obvious. It wasn't obvious to me. I had to have two colleagues of mine sit me down and say, do you realise what you're in fact doing is counterproductive? You're the problem. And well, it's, you know, and you think you've even had some degree of success doing it in the manner which you've done it without thinking about it forever. And then somebody out of left field suddenly suggests, well, maybe what you're doing now is inappropriate for this group of people in this place. And I guess that's why we all need the mentor, critical friend relationships in our lives. We need people who know and love you, and you the same with them in a sense, and can accept that they're saying things to benefit you and the role that you play and the people that you are in fact working with. I think that was the hardest thing for me to come to grips with. You know, the people that I work with, in a sense, had a reasonable amount of success, but what we were doing at this time for these people was totally inappropriate. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't something that happened in just a short discussion of 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour. This was something that went over weeks of discussion following the review we did of our players. And thank goodness, having two, and they've remained two of my closest friends and mentors, who had the courage and the understanding to be able to deliver to me the feedback that I needed to know and understand to make the change that was necessary then. The most difficult thing I've done in my life.
Yeah, I can understand that. Laurent has asked if you've got any thoughts on leadership challenges in the context of generational change, so the boomers to younger, and the gender shift of males, females parity as well.
Well, yeah, I'm probably not the right bloke to ask, but now I've got grandchildren who are coming through the system, and the values they have, the behaviours that they follow, the beliefs and understandings which drive their behaviour at the moment, the things that they choose to do and choose to do well and commit to, etc. I stopped lecturing at Deakin University a year ago because I had no relationship at all with the current generation coming through. They're thinking about issues that I thought were important and underpinned what we should be doing. Particularly, I lecture in a coaching degree, Bachelor of Applied Science in Sports Coaching and Sports Administration. And I suddenly realised that that generation coming through have, for whatever reason, a different way of viewing the world and their role within the world, and I accept that. I don't think that there's rights and wrongs in this. This is what they could do. And if you don't have the capacity, I recognise that I probably wasn't capable of influencing them in a positive manner the way I would like to, and so I withdrew, to be quite truthful. I retired from that work. I no longer, they rang me the other day, the replacement of mine's a Canadian, he can't get into the country. So they're in trouble again. They need someone to come and help out. But I don't, again, my argument was that this has passed me by, that there are people who have the capacity to deliver what is required for this group, which is certainly different to my thinking in the manner which I've worked for a long period of time. I think that's the best I can answer that.
No, that's good. That's good because it recognises it. Tim Moore has asked for any hints, and this is where you're working as a coach with professional paid people and your foundation, I assume a lot of volunteers, of how president-elects can deal with members and volunteers as aside from employees? Because it's very different when you're working with volunteers and leading volunteers. So what hints in that can you give?
I agree with that, but I don't care what your leadership role is and whether you're working with paid employees or where you're working with honorary people. We all need, in each situation, those who are being led, we all need to be recognised, feel worthy, given feedback and strong direction about the things that we want to do better. And I think the essence of it is still to provide in a very, I would think, strong and positive way, quickly lock on to the things that these people do, which are making a positive difference to our institution, to our group, or to the people that we're trying to assist in society. And I think having your knowing the person and then being quick to respond to anything they do in a positive way to make this a better environment is what good leadership is about. What are the talents that you bring to this particular role? What can you do to make a positive difference? And then reinforcing and rewarding that in whatever way you can, as often as you can, to make the people feel good about themselves so they'll want to repeat it and even want to get better at doing this as they are now. We all should think about the people in our lives. I do. I think in our lives who have made a really strong and positive impact on us. Why did we want to work for them? Why did we want to get better? Why did we want to improve the situation in which we both found ourselves in? And it was this leader, believing in me that I could provide something to do that, but then feeding back in a positive way the difference I was making to that group or that situation. And it's got to be front of mind. You've got to be thinking all the time. These people, particularly in roles like Rotary, where people are giving an enormous amount of time and effort and energy and skills and techniques for only the satisfaction of making a difference to the world in which they live. That's why I love Rotary. And they're genuine people doing a terrific job, and how much better they've made the environments in which they work. And sometimes they don't understand that. Sometimes we're slow to recognise, or there isn't the resources or feedback coming back to them to make them feel good about the work that they're doing. I'm a real Rotary fan in the basis. I've been all over the country and seen the stuff they're doing out there, and a lot of it under here, which nobody knows about, which is making such a positive difference to the environment and the cultures and the communities in which they work. That's why I'm here. Why I said yes, because they've been wonderful support for the Mailbag Foundation. Rotary, more than any other organisation, has supported our work in rural regional Australia.
Yeah. You mentioned that you changed your leadership style when the players actually pulled you up and said, this is not working. I've got two people, Paul and Fabienne, have both gone, how do you know when to change? And are there any triggers to help you determine that you need this a change because of the situational leadership? And, what is there, apart from someone going, you need to change?
That's a brilliant question, because it for most of us, we aren't aware. For most of us, you can't sense in yourself that what you're doing is not working. It usually needs this mentor or critical friend. And that's why we should surround ourselves with people that we trust, who love us and want us to help us be better in doing the things we do. I think that is almost impossible. You argue with it, but other people have a different view. It's impossible to do without some input, feedback, direction, understanding, empathy from people that you know and trust in your life. And that's why I think, for me, the mentors that I've had, numerous, I couldn't mention what I had, but the mentors I've had have been so significant because they were strong enough to come to me and nail me at particular times in my career. Do you understand that this is the result of your behaviour? Do you understand that this is a negative output from the way you're going about this? And until somebody actually says it to you, who you do trust and have a good relationship with, it probably doesn't impact on you hard enough to actually bring about the change that you need to do. That's why I think the strongest, I love the role that I do now, the mentoring critical friend role. I'm off tomorrow to my grade 3 that I taught at Monbulk in 1964. And we've met every year since. 57 grade 3 are now bringing their children, their grandchildren. We're meeting at Macclesfield tonight for our annual barbecue. And they're kids who are 7 or 8 years of age and now have got their own grandkids at the same age. And you realise how, as a teacher, when those kids are developing, how much you've impacted on life. And that relationship stayed all the way. Hardly missed a year of COVID last year, we couldn't meet, but other than that, we've met all the time. And that's, as a parent, as a teacher, as a coach, as a chairman, as a manager, we're all in a position to make the people and the institution better. But we need feedback as to how well we are doing, whether it's appropriate, the role and the manner in which we go about it is right for this particular situation at this time. Not easy. So if you haven't got the two-way feedback going, if you haven't got yourself opened up, if you haven't got the critical friends and the mentors in your life, unlikely for anything to change. So if you don't have them, go look for them. I don't know anybody who's been asked to mentor, be a critical friend, this process that says no. That's one of the nicest things you can do, that someone comes to you and trusts you with their life. And I think as such, we all of us, and Rotary is a classical, institution around this country, which can do exactly that. It can provide the directions for those who are making a difference in a supportive, in a very supportive, fair way. It's a fascinating study, but we don't talk about critical friends. We do a bit about mentorship, etc. Now there's a fair bit of that going on, but to the degree that we need to do it for everyone, it's only a minimal impact at the moment, which should be in a massive part of Australian culture.
Yeah, Josh has put a question about feedback in selective to feedback, as some feedback can be destructive as opposed to constructive. But you also talk about the 360-degree feedback. Have you found, when you've told your people to do 360, that the boss has been receptive to that? And have you had to find that you really had to be selective and you find some feedback is not given because you know that the boss is actually not going to receive it? Because I know personally, the bosses always go, give us the feedback, and they do not want to hear anything critical, so you just don't give the feedback. So how have you found that, and how do you...
But same, right, exactly what you're saying. No, but that is, I would say that everybody I see faces, etc. But all of us have been down that road in some shape or form. And the giving and receiving of feedback, it is a skill or a technique, I don't know what you call it. It's a fantastic skill in itself to be able to leave open and honest feedback in a manner which people will be receptive to it. As soon as we start to get feedback which we don't like, the door closes immediately. So being yourself, I would start the other way around with me. I would be going to them and saying, how can I assist you to be better? What are we, as the leadership here, the boss or the manager, whatever, what are we doing which is counterproductive to what we want us, including you, to achieve? Or how can we provide you with the positive impacts on what you're doing, which is making us a better thing? Now, getting that balance right is very difficult, but most of us live off what people see in us, which they like and is good and seems to be productive. And we, as you suggest, we close the door immediately to anything that might be negative. So we've got to build a culture that says it's okay at any time for this information passage to go either way, and it's going to be receptive. We've got to sit down and have that discussion.
Yep.
But we are individually and collectively trying to be better and do the best we can. And we can't, it's impossible to do that and change without feedback. I'm telling you, people remain the same until something impacts on them and says, well, I need to do this differently and I'll try it. So it is, to me, it rolls off the tongue, giving and receiving feedback. It is one of the most difficult and significant elements in leadership, if you like, that's what we're talking about, in leadership roles, is your ability to give and receive feedback in the manner which will be accepted and worked upon. Not, as we're saying, it rolls off the tongue very easy, it's not. And and we need to have that open discussion. Why aren't you changing? Why am I still impacting on you in this way? Why aren't you listening? Why don't you want to change? And they're difficult conversations to have, but you feel so much better afterwards when you've created an environment where people are willing. Oh, I've had terrible things said to me about the manner which I've spoken to them or delivered feedback in front of the group or whatever. I've really hurt them, scarred them, maybe for life. And unless somebody is courageous enough, unless you are open and honest enough to have that happen, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, exactly. Ada has come up with a question. It's an interesting one, because wanting to know what we can do as club leaders when a group within the club is not on board with the leadership style. Because, Rotary, like everything else, we're going through a lot of change, and therefore that change actually results in a lot of the leadership styles having to change to accommodate the environment we're in. So what do you suggest?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I've got the answer to that, because that's a group within our group. And I'm not sure whether, if she's saying, well, this is a group which are contrary, or working not so much contrary, but are negative in the sense of where we want to go, but it's a group within the place who are not. And again, nothing changes, nothing will change unless you somehow confront it in the best possible way. We've got to decide who are the better people to lead this discussion, if you like, a two-way discussion. Say, well, what are we doing that has set you aside? Why do you think this way and can't work with us as a total organisation? And look, and again, it's easy for me to say it, but to actually structure that up and to make it happen, that's a very difficult process, and it takes a lot of human skills to actually bring that about. But nothing's going to change.
No, as we're finding.
unless it might change for the negative. It may be no different, or in fact, it might be worse. But nothing's going to change until you actually confront it. And I think Australians aren't good at that. We tend to deviate and don't, and wish it or hope it'll go away or whatever else. But I think that's one of the learnings over my lifetime. Doesn't matter what, until you confront. You still might muck it up when you confront it, but it ain't going to change unless you do. So have a good think about it. Who are the people most involved? I would be getting trust people out of the group, which has sort of separated itself out. People that you know and trust, sit down and say, why is this occurring? Why do you sense and feel this way? What are we doing that is affecting you negatively? What can we do now to change that? Have we lost you? Have I lost you?
No, I put myself on mute because my cuckoo clock was going, and then I couldn't unmute myself to ask you the next question. So I'm sorry, I'm back.
That's all right. I just had the dog coming in looking for something to eat.
Di Harrison has asked the question, how have you found, or have you, that social media has had an impact on how people lead and leadership styles? Or what do you think about the social media?
Yeah, I'm probably the worst person in the world, because I refused, Gail, my partner, is into every shape and form. I refused to be on social media, which is terrible, isn't it? Email, etc. But it's certainly, I've got a really good working relationship with my 5 grandkids. Wasn't a very good father, I can tell you that, but I've improved my relationships with my grandkids. They spend half their life now on their phones, talking and something, and it's really sad, because I can almost tell what sort of day they're having by what they've been receiving, listening to, watching, talking about on their phones. And to me, that's quite sad. And I don't think COVID's helped at all, because it's locked them away again. We're not forced into a social group in the way that we were, where things are a little bit more open. That's a very closed shop. So I'm a bit old in another generation to be able to talking about that, but there is no doubt it's an issue.
Yeah.
And I've got two of my grandchildren now at university haven't been, don't go, well, they're doing everything online, etc., and they don't have, I think back now, and many of you would, that the relationships that you form in your late teens, early 20s through whatever, your sport or your academic education, in my case, they remain your lifetime friends. So I feel very sad that they're not able to develop openly the friendships in the manner which you would one-on-one or 3 or 4 on 5 or whatever it is. They don't have that. So I'm really concerned that one of the byproducts of our lockdown and COVID is going to be in what I would call communication styles between people. Yep. I might be totally wrong. They might be getting more information and better than we used to, but I doubt it.
Very nice. Moving off the leadership and onto your men's bag, why do you think there is so much about breast cancer but very little about prostate cancer when the numbers of the deaths are actually quite so disparate?
Well, I don't want to be jailed or anything or whatever, but men are hopeless.
Yeah.
They really are. I mean, the story I told about Warrnambool just underlined to me that there's 40 women turn up, and there's 40 blokes who wouldn't have been there unless their wives had brought them. And it's a bit the same way. I'm dealing with this insidious disease almost every day in some shape or form. And men are just so slow. My own father, he went down that track and did nothing about it and died the most painful death. I watched him die over 4 years because he refused to go and do anything about it, which sent me that. I've got a brother who's a doctor. He's a medical director of the Repat in Austin Hospital, and he's sitting on a PSA which is rising now. He's 82 years of age and not sure whether to do something about it or not, because he's reached that stage. How much longer is he going to live and how it's going to affect his life? And men have been very, very slow, and the men are part of this today will understand. Men have been very, very slow to care about themselves. They should be doing it for the ability they have to be the fathers and husbands, which they should be. It's not a difficult thing to go and have a blood test. If you have your annual meeting with your doctor, part of that you should ask them if they don't want it. Well, you say you demand it. It's a simple blood test. They'll give you a reading. It gives you some indication of where you are. But men have been absolutely. I am so frustrated in the last 20 years. I don't know why. I was right onto it from the day one and pursued it. I would have lost 7 or 8 of my mates. 7. I've lost them. Died of prostate cancer. Wow. And I've been down that particular pathway, and they didn't have the confidence or interest or whatever in themselves to go and ask the question to do something about it. So it is an insidious disease which is killing Australian men at a very fast rate. Why? I don't know. I wish I knew the answer, because I've been out there thumping communities all around Australia, and nothing's changed. The men who aren't going are still in the same numbers as they were 10, 20 years ago, would you believe? Yep. And rural regional Australia is the worst, because they're men who think that they're bulletproof and it's not going to happen to them and they'll be okay. And when it comes round and it's obvious they've got a problem, too late, they die, too late. So we should be, A, knowing our genetic history, and B, doing our annual checkup, including a simple PSA test to keep a check on what's happening within you.
Yeah. I think it's the last question, but I'll just double check to see if someone put another. Okay. So last question, which kind of relates to both the leadership and with your mailbag, we do a lot, and this is from Keith, we do a lot about effective speaking, but we don't develop a lot about effective listening skills. Have you had any experience in how to develop, which would, you know, for leaderships they know, but even just getting that message of getting your prostate checked through is, you know, part of this whole effective listening skills. So have you had any experience in how you would develop that?
No, there's a lot of thinking and work being done in exactly that area. How can we get people to think about issues rather than talking about issues, to think about issues which affect themselves and others around them? And it's been a very, very slow process of change, even to acknowledge that we have a problem. People think that talking is what it's all about, that listening is not really a major factor in communication. And unless we start to do it, and we are within the education system, we're training primary school children at an early age now to start to listen and hear rather than talk. And that's starting to happen because we've acknowledged exactly what you've said. And until that becomes embedded in Australian culture, Australian lives, then I don't think things are going to change too much. It's not, in my humble opinion, an expectation of people, male and female of all ages, to become outstanding listeners. We talk about, we have orations and talking, and my kids are grandkids are going through classes where they're now having to stand up and deliver and do all that sort of stuff. But there's nothing in a constructive way that I know within the education system. I think it's just beginning, that we understand the other is equally, if not more important, and we should be implementing it as a skill or technical learning thing at the beginning. Primary school is where it all happens. Too late, secondary school, it happens in primary school. And that should be part of the accepted curriculum and taught exceptionally well.
Yeah. Well, that is all the questions we have. Thank you, David. I'm going to now hand you over to David McPherson, who's going to do the proper thank you. But thank you for answering all our questions. That was lovely.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, David. That was certainly a motivational and inspirational presentation. And thank you, Chair, for curating that question and answer session. I thought some of the questions were very thoughtful questions indeed. My name is David McPherson. I'm from District 9790, which covers most of the northeast of Victoria, including the southern part of the Riverina area, down to the northern suburbs of Melbourne. Let me just say that a presenter of the calibre of David is well sought after in the commercial world and can command a significant fee for his services. For David's presentation here today, he is not benefiting one iota in terms of a fee for service. Instead, he just asked that we make a donation to his Mailbag Foundation. As such, the DGEs from the 6 districts here today have elected to make a contribution to that foundation as recognition for his contribution to our multi-district pets. David's presentation was inspirational and contained lots of food for thought, and he made relevant points that were very applicable to most leaders in most Rotary clubs. He stated that the leadership style is determined by the situation that exists at the time, so it needs to change depending on the situation. He gave 7 very relevant points. Number 1, engagement really matters. Asking questions, hearing the answers, and responding appropriately. Employees are not human resources, they're human beings. Mindfulness, develop a caring culture. Be genuinely empathetic for your people. Ask about their welfare outside of work and Rotary and outside of whatever the task that you're currently doing. Build people's skills and capability. Create a vision for them as well as for the organisation. Building a high performance culture, and that involves creating a psychologically safe environment and an understanding of the structure of the organisation and their role within it. Constant feedback from leader to the team and from the team to the leader, and open and honest and immediate response, feedback. And his appeal to fellows here today to take their health seriously is relevant in today's society. Too many men believe that they're bulletproof and continue to treat their body with disrespect until one day they find out that they're not. You know, it's great to hear that his foundation is supporting the placement of prostate machines in rural and regional locations. And it's interesting to note, and quite relevant to note, that 1 in 6 will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. 1 in 6 men. 1 in 32 men will die because of it. And David shared a very personal story about his own prostate cancer diagnosis with a good outcome. So I think this should be motivation for all of us men to take it seriously and go and get checked.